The purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. It is no substitute for professional care by your doctor or your qualified healthcare professional. Never disregard or delay professional medical advice because of something you've heard on this podcast or in any linked material. Guests who speak on this podcast express their own opinions, experience, and conclusions. Dr. Shirley neither endorses nor opposes any particular opinion discussed on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, practice, institution, or other entity with which Dr. Shirley may be affiliated.
Welcome to Forever Fab, the podcast on fashion, the art of living, and all things beauty. This podcast is curated by Dr. Shirley Madere, MD, as the definitive source of holistic wellness through beauty.
Welcome to the Forever Fab podcast, the podcast dedicated to fashion, the art of living well, and all things beauty. I'm your host, Dr. Shirley Madere, the founder of the Holistic Plastic Surgery Philosophy and your purveyor of this definitive source of living a beautiful life. This week's episode is dedicated to self-worth. And the topic is negotiating a fabulous life, women, money, and the power of high self-worth. Welcome to my interview with Jennifs Childhood. Jennifs Childhood, my gosh, spent over 11 years negotiating some of the most epic deals in the music industry. She has worked with some names you may or may not recognize: Mark Ronson, Outkast, Rihanna, Beyonce, and Jay-Z, with whom, notably, she helped to launch the streaming service Tidal. That's major, Jennifs. She is the former EVP of Strategic Marketing and Business Development for Roc Nation and the former president of Superfly Productions. It is clear to me that Jennifs loves music, but I also believe that she loves helping women and supporting women put their best face forward more. She is now the CEO and founder of the Justice Department, a female-focused and woke males, may I add, legal and strategic advisory firm that works to get women equal pay, achieve their business goals, and jumpstart their success, and actually add even more to their success. Jennifs' accolades are many. And as fly as she is, and I'm sure you'll see that too, she has graciously agreed to spend some time with me on the Forever Fab podcast today. So I'll stop there and get on with the interview. She joined us today via Zoom. Thank you, Jennifs, and welcome to Forever Fab.
Thank you. That is quite an introduction. Appreciate it. And thank you for having me. Amazing.
Of course. So let's get it started, shall we?
Yes, of course.
Tell me a bit about your history, Jennifs, about your childhood. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
Well, I am from the Pacific Northwest and from a, not a higher educated family, really working class and pretty underserved kind of population. And so, my mother didn't graduate high school because she was pregnant with my sister. And so really for me, I just knew I wanted a different life. I knew I wanted a life with choices. And I wanted, and I saw that the way to get that was higher education. And thankfully, I did well in school and it became a priority of mine. So at that moment in just growing up, I wasn't quite sure, but I knew it had something to do with getting me out of where I was and that I had a lot more money than what I had.
That's pretty compelling enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it did help me, move on to the next level of deciding to go to college.
Yes.
And, when you don't have any money, you don't really know where to go to college or you don't, so you just kind of hear about things. I really wanted to go to Stanford. My counselors were like, you could go, but it's going to be so expensive for out of state. You just don't have the financial means to go. So why don't you go to University of Washington? You'll get, a scholarship. You'll get grant. And that's what I did. So I ended up going there. I was living in Seattle during like kind of those grunge years. It had kind of taken off, and I was really into music. So I was hanging out at those clubs, meeting those bands, because Seattle is actually very small when it comes down to it.
Yes.
And I was like, I know, I'll be a music attorney. And, because I graduated college, and it's not like I had a college roommate dad network to be like, oh, you can do this and I'm going to refer you to that. Like I didn't know what was available. I didn't have anybody to help me. Went to the counselor's office, the recruiting office, and they were sending me on insurance sales and wine distribution. And I was like, this is not what I want to be doing,
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to go to law school. And thankfully I got into Cornell Law School, which, helped propel me to another level and opened me up to the East Coast, New York City. I was like, this is my place.
Yes.
And I'm going to be a music entertainment attorney. So when ignorance is bliss, right? Just follow to be wise. And that's what I did.
Listen, I have a lot of love for the University of Washington. I have family in Seattle.
Amazing.
And my cousin went to school there, graduated, and was drafted into the NBA from University of Washington, Defensive Player of the Year. So I have a lot of love.
I love it.
So
yeah.
We're a kindred spirits that way.
I get it.
That's right. Go Huskies. Exactly. Well, I love that you were so determined, but at the same time that you were determined and focused, you kind of went with the flow, right? Because you said ignorance is bliss. So you had an idea of what you loved. And then you thought, this feels right. But at the same time, you didn't necessarily know what was next. Is that right?
I just kind of kept that going with my instinct, and it was like, well, what are my alternatives? To stay here? No. And, it's like, like a lot of people who are growing up and a little like, maybe a little insecure finding their way. It's like, you kind of think, oh, I'm going to go with the whole crowd. Oh, we're all going to go to law school. Yeah. We're all going to go to college. And then like I sign up and I'm like, okay, did everybody sign up? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going.
Yeah.
And I just kept finding that courage to move on into the unknown and, follow a very non-traditional path from my upbringing. So, but, thankfully it just kept me moving, forward and moving forward and moving forward. And I remember even in times in law school, which was torture and so hard and like so emotionally and mentally draining. I'm like, I'm going to give up. I want to give up. I can't do this anymore. I'm like, what else am I going to do? Where am I going? And that just what kept motivating me.
Well, it sounds as if you have a lot of grit and courage. And I'm glad that you continued to power through, because again, you went in like, hey, we're all going to do this together. And like everybody else dropped out. But
exactly. It's like, okay, never mind.
Okay, I'm it. So, okay, you go to law school and you graduate, and now it's time to find some work, and you did. What was your first experience working with people in music or within the music industry that solidified your choice, that made you say, oh yeah, I'm good. This is where I want to be?
Well, when I went into, between your second and third year of law school, you intern, at these big Wall Street firms. And it just really, like, I walked in there and it felt so foreign. First of all, it was a woman, not a lot of them.
No.
Second, like, I stood out. I was tall. I'm 5'8", 5'9", 5'10" with heels.
Yeah.
I'm like, really like blonde, like thin, like it was just like, I didn't fit in, right? I just didn't fit in there. It just didn't look the type. No one, really expected me to be smart. And it just was like, I wasn't from there. I didn't go to the right school. I didn't, prep here. I didn't go to, I went to the right school as far as Cornell was concerned, but it was just like, I just didn't fit in. Like people, had connections and, so just all around, like, and so, like they were nice to me. It was great. Like, I did well, I suppose, but it just wasn't like, I wasn't passionate about it. Yeah. And then when I got into, started interviewing to be a music attorney and then got the job, like, I was like, oh, I can get clients here. Like, and, it's like, I was going out of clubs at night in Soho, and then wearing a suit by day. Like, it just was a double life.
Yes.
And, so it was, I could lead, like my worlds merged, right? So I didn't have to have two different wardrobe. I didn't have to have two different identities. it was just, it was just different. And I became like, it became obvious to me that I could actually succeed here.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's a beautiful merging.
Yeah.
Right? Serendipity, fortuity, whatever you call it, that you manifested it, but it came together nicely for you.
Yeah, it did. And so I knew this is where I needed to be, and I could, and for the most part, like a lot of musicians are musicians because they're so naturally talented. It's not like they went to a higher education to do it. Or a lot of them came from meager means like I did. And so I really identified with them because all of a sudden they're told they have to have an attorney. They're not really sure why. They're not really sure what to ask them. And it's not a litigator, it's transactional, and they're like, oh, okay. And so it can be intimidating, and like, and I just put them all at ease to be like, oh, I'm from there too. Like if somebody told me I had to have an attorney, I'd be like, okay, well, how do I even choose one?
Right.
And so it's a lot of trust, and
exactly.
And so I did well in speaking to them and gaining their trust and confidence. So it was really something that I knew, this was my calling. This was what I was supposed to be doing at that time.
That's right. Natural abilities met natural abilities, and you came together and created something, co-created something amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I presume that at the time you were, coming up in the business of music and the legalities of music, most of the power brokers, the people, at the C-suite, if that's, an appropriate term, most of the people making these big deal, multi-figure deals were male. Perhaps they still are. I don't know. But how did you handle being not only the only woman in the room, but the only really different person in the room, and more importantly, at the table?
Yeah. I mean, look, it was never easy. I went in very ignorant about it. I was like, I just thought, there's always like a bunch of women. It's like, nope, not at all. Not at all. And I started realizing that I could manipulate situations by being a woman instead of trying to be a man. And that I could, use my feminine wits and wiles and understanding of men to get what I want, not in a like salacious way, nothing like that. You know what I mean?
Right,
but it's like, well, why can't I have that $6 million? And like, oh, well, no one's ever asked me that before, like, why can't I do those things? And just like be authentic to who I was, but also very strong, and just continuing to like, why, and kind of, for lack of a better word, nag them until I got what I wanted,
We're good at nagging, aren't we?
Yeah, I guess, and I'm going to turn that into a positive word. So, and it really helped that I was a lot of my clients were, very underestimated and underappreciated and underserved. And so, it was really like being an activist or an advocate, really, when I started working in, representing people in hip hop, predominantly Black men, predominantly from, urban, areas,
underserved, underprivileged,
in the projects, and they didn't have, Billboard, didn't have its own chart for hip hop. The Grammys weren't televising the hip hop awards, but so there's a lot of things. People were just, the morals clauses were crazy, and so it became easy for me to fight for their equality and their worth. And I took great pride in it. And I was really passionate about it.
Yeah. That's clearly evidence. So again, kudos to you. When did you notice, working with all those people and certainly being at the forefront of representation for hip hop artists and R&B artists in the music industry, when did you first notice the lack of gender parity in the industry?
I had done a deal that we represented a lot of executives in the music industry. Mm-hmm. They tend to get actual contracts and offered contracts very quickly. Mm-hmm. So I was I got handed a deal for this guy, and it was at a publishing company, and he was a director level, and he was offered $130,000. And, I did the deal and I was like, okay, people get paid pretty well in the music industry. And then I did a deal for, the senior director in the same department. It was an A&R department, meaning that they're the ones who find the talent, the songwriters, which brings in the revenue for the company, the revenue generators. And she was given 90. And, I was kind of assigned this and the staff meeting, and I went, wait, what?
Yeah.
90? What are you talking about? Like, we just did the one for the guy underneath her and he's getting 130. It's like, well, whatever. Like, that's what she's fine with it. That's what they agreed to. And I'm like, but why are we fine with this? We have this knowledge.
Yeah.
Like, this is awful. Why would that be okay? And then, I just kept noticing. So he goes, fine, okay, you get her more money. And I tried to get her more, and I get her like $10,000 more, but that was it. She never forgot that. Posts about it all the time. We're still friends, and she, went on to have a really, pretty big career, and her husband is really big in the music industry. And so, we, I just started really advocating for that. And then I started noticing like more and more of it happening. And then by the time you're in the C-suite, it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and compounded over time into millions of dollars.
That's right.
So I went and I bought like these books at Barnes and Noble. Like, I was like, I'm not educated in this. How do I like talk to women about, advocating for their worth? And so I found 3 books. That was it.
Wow.
I so remember going, I'm looking for like, gender equality, and they're like way over, and this like tiny
in the back corner.
I'm like, there are 3 books. And it was, if you don't have big boobs, wear ponytails, which is by Barbara Corcoran.
Wow.
Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office One-on-One, and Play Like a Man and Win Like a Woman, which is by Gail Evans, who is amazing.
Wow.
And basically all the tenets are still true. And, when people have rewritten books, they basically have written the same thing, and the same kind of things that we have done, as women, to actually hold ourselves back. But then, the institutional gender, inequality and gender, just like discrimination as well. So that's when I started noticing it. And I was just always like perplexed, like, why isn't this like a state of emergency? Why don't more people care about this? Both genders. Like, this is not okay, Yeah. And that, started it, and it never stopped, my passion for that.
And is that when you had your aha moment and decided to pivot to launch your own firm?
Well, that happened like, in the beginning of my career, that initial, thing. But what happened was, I was going through my career, and I went in after the 11 years at, the Carol Guido and Groffman. I went into Rock Nation in-house. I was general counsel. I was in the EVP doing all strategic marketing and business development there. Then when I went to Superfly, I was, the president. I joined our friend Dee's organization. I was the chairwoman, there. And that was all through, my time at Rock Nation. So I was, joining these organizations for women's equality and, networking and all of that. But I was, I like to say I was like making money for men by day and trying to overthrow the patriarchy at night. And so when my deal was coming up at Superfly, there was no reason for me to continue on. I had done the job there. They didn't need me anymore. I didn't need to stay there. And it was like, you know what, guys?
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Forever Fab, the podcast on fashion, the art of living, and all things beauty, curated by Dr. Shirley Madeir, MD. Live beautifully and help make the world a more beautiful place.
Parlay that into doing the exact same thing, but only for women. And use all of that experience and help women only. And so that's what the Justice Department does. We have a law firm on one side called a justice firm. We have consulting, strategy, and management company on the other side called Lady Business. And we are helping women, like financially in their deal making, make more money.
Yeah.
Because when women have more money, they will have more power. And this world will be a better place because we will do better things with it than the current people with a lot of money.
100%. So your firm, the Justice Department, is, again, just beautifully and aptly named. I love, again, how everything just came together. It was almost as if this was your God-given purpose, right?
Yes.
You help women, as you say, to make more money, to get the pay that they deserve, to achieve their business goals. You provide advice for women looking to climb the career ladder and to negotiate better deals through Lady Business. if I may ask this, what qualities embody your ideal client? Like if you could sit in your office, desk chair, and have the ideal client come in, who would she look like and what would she be looking for?
Well, the first thing that she needs to have is the understanding that there is an issue, right? And that women are not equal. And if we think that we can stay in the patriarchal system and become equal, it's going to be over 200 years, right?
Yeah.
And that's a quality for all of us. That's for every race, and the good news about women is we're 50% of the population. So we're every race, religion, socioeconomic background, sexual orientation. And so you support women, it's easy to, and so to understand that, like they have to understand that is an issue because it is in our DNA and it's how we approach business. Yeah. And then how to solve that is to give business to women, right? And to give business to women, not just ones that are in the patriarchal system that ladder up to men, but like really take chances on women building their own things. And that is, we control 80% of the purchasing power. And if we used all that purchasing power and only gave our dollars to women at the top, right, that where it ladders up to the top, think about how we could change things in such a short period of time.
Absolutely.
And so those are just like things that in their DNA that I need. I'm really targeting women who've been in business for a while, right? So they are somebody who it's not typically like I love to give advice and things like this for women starting out, et cetera, but that's not my typical client. My typical client has a business that's been, going for a while, or building their brand, and they have serious traction, and it's like, how do we take it to the next level?
Got it. Yes.
Because that's where my sweet spot is. It's not starting from zero. It's kind of like, okay, we're on first base. Like, how do we get to home plate? Not to use male, sports analogies, but it seems to work.
It works. Your roster of clients is, absolutely impressive. And I mentioned some of them earlier, but others include Amy Sacco. Remember those days?
Yeah.
Karen Toomey. And those classes kick my butt too.
Yeah.
And of course, our mutual connection, Garance Doré.
Of course.
And that's just to name a few. Everybody has to start somewhere, right? These fabulous, names and these fabulous women, they had to start from somewhere. So whether we're seasoned or we're just starting out, in your experience, what would you say are the one or two most common mistakes that women make when they are looking to scale and grow and go to the next level, as you mentioned?
Right. I think the major mistake is not hiring the right proper person with experience to help them do that. It's like, you're a doctor, right? It's like, if I want to go, I don't go to you when I have a heart problem, right? And I don't expect you to learn about my heart problem.
Right.
So you need the proper people around you who know how to do it. And, and you can't do everything alone.
Absolutely.
And women often have this thing about saving money and doing it all themselves, right? And so the analogy I always use is we don't, pre-COVID anyway, and hopefully soon, we don't do our own nails. We don't watch our own kids, if we're working. We don't do our own hair. We don't clean our own houses. Why would you be able to be your own lawyer, accountant, PR person, everything all at once,
right. At least if you have that choice, those options.
Yes. And my clients do have that choice, It's like, hire the lawyer, hire the lawyer. I hire lawyers for me.
Yeah.
It's like, hire the lawyer that can help you. Hire the right person that can network for you. Hire that right business development person. Hire that right PR branding person. And you need, so those are the people who are really going to help you. From a legal perspective, if you don't have everything right in the beginning and you're not watching out for your business, those are the stories that we keep hearing, the massive female founders who have 0.1% of their company and are getting skewered in the press, or the ones who, who've just been, they're the ones working, 40 out of 24 hours in a day. And like everyone else is making more money than them. just not protecting yourself, and hearing those horror stories, and the women that never are like, oh, I don't want to rock the apple cart, and I know that I'm a partner in this big company, but I don't want somebody to like come in and negotiate my deal. I'm like, no, you need that, because the guy who's 10 years junior than you in the next office that just bought a second Hamptons home is making 3 times as much money as you. It's just all of those things, and just not really properly negotiating for yourself and for negotiating for your business.
Yeah. And one of your missions is to help women make more money, as you mentioned. But in one of the interviews that I read about, you stated that more money gives women, yes, more money gives women more power, confidence, and choices. Is making more money simply a matter of women having the confidence to ask for what we know we deserve, or are there other variables that we can control to help us make more money?
I think, yes, that is one of them. It's asking for your worth, right? And if you have the means, you should have somebody negotiate on your behalf and do that for you.
Yes.
It's never like, you're sitting in the room like, tell me what you want. No, tell me what you're offering.
Yeah.
And okay, you're offering that. Great. Let me think about that. You don't have to go back immediately. You don't have to feel like that force. But if you're making more money, even if you think that you are fine without it, right? I'd say this to people all the time too. The guy next to you is making $250. Your job is like for $250, right? So I only need $100,000 to live. I mean, we're in New York City. That's crazy,
Yeah.
but still,
Right.
take that $250 and do something with it. Then, invest in female founders. Only 2% of women, females get the VC, and 0.5 if you're a woman of color. Like,
Yeah.
invest in them. Spread
Yes.
it out.
Yeah.
Getting friends and family money is very difficult
Yeah.
for women in general. Donate to your charity. Help somebody else, but take it, because
Yeah.
you're not helping that woman coming up behind you that really needs it and supports her whole family.
Right.
You're not helping your own kids learn about their own worth.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is helping your bosses make more money.
Yeah.
You're not like saving the company, anything. Somebody's taking that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
You also stated that men get hired for potential and women get hired for experience, meaning it's after we've proven we can get the job done right that we'd be considered to get hired. So understanding that this is part of a very long-standing systemic and pervasive patriarchal societal gender bias, what can we do now to help change the tide for the better, not only for ourselves, but as you mentioned, for the people coming up behind us, next to us, coming up
Yeah.
in the
Like I think it's a lot of about education, right? It's about talking about these things and not being like, oh, I can't say, like my favorite like quote in like, I loved that show Veep, when she was running for president, and her, minion right hand, Gary, would be like, oh, talk about how you're a woman, a strong woman. She's like, I can't say a woman. No one wants, I'm a woman. No one wants to hear that,
Right.
but we have to, like,
Yeah.
we're women. We are different, celebrate our differences. Do you know these facts? It's like, talk about those facts. Do you know that? I remember when I left Rock Nation and I was talking to headhunters, like, well, I was like, I want a president level or above. They're like, you've never been a president. I go, neither was Obama until he was. Like,
Right. Exactly.
how am I going to, like, but I have all, the makings and experience to take that next leap.
That's
And
right.
I was just unapologetic about it. And so I found a place where I could have that title,
Yes.
and it wasn't easy. It's going to take women, twice as long as it takes men to find that. But like, that is the role that I want. And that is the role that I will accept. And why would I accept less than that?
Yeah.
So it's fighting for that. And what, in whatever that is. So it's, it's education. It's also, educating all of them around it. And for women to understand and make sure that we're not making the same mistakes as men are, we're not falling into that trap too.
Now, how did you learn all this about money? Were you very aware of money as a child? And how did you get your money education? Because you are really savvy and one focused, as they say in Buddhism, have that one focused mind about where you want to be and how, and what you're willing to do to get that. Where did that come from? Because I want some of it.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it is from making a lot of mistakes. A lot of it is seeing how, when I was really just analyzing why we don't have more clout and power as a whole when we're 50% of the population, you cannot take the fact away that, like, we live in a capitalist society. And, women don't like to talk about money. They think it's icky. It's not the end all be all. And it's not. That's not what it's about. But you know what? It gives you choices. Like when we were growing up, we had no choice because we had no money. So it allows you the choice to, if you're in a really, really horrible situation in your job, to quit and still feed your family. It allows you your peace of mind, because I know what it's like not to have money. And it is a luxury not to have to think about what you're going to eat.
Indeed.
It is a luxury not to have to think about feeding your kids. It's a luxury not to have to think about housing. And so, it does not buy you happiness, but it buys you a certain luxury of comfort and convenience that it doesn't add stress to you, right?
Yes.
And so, and we just are not going to do the same things that men do with their money. I use this analogy to men and they like cringe, but I'm like, if you and I each had hundreds of millions of dollars, we would not be in our private jets individually flying to a private island that our accountant Fred owned to have sex with underage men. Okay. We would not do that.
Yeah.
We would not do anything half as salacious as that.
Oh my God.
We would use it for greater good.
Wow. Yeah.
We just would. And so, like, that's to me, the one way in, and we will build community around it. Like, and when we have it, we give it more. There's all this proof that it's like, and all this data that their trickle-down economics actually works among women. Yeah. Feeding community, you pay more to the people that are helping you out. And that is, for the most part. I'm sure there's few exceptions, but if we all had it and we didn't feel like we were competing for that one office, and one spot, and we had enough to give it around, what could happen? Like, think about that.
It would totally be different.
It was,
to say the least.
Very different.
To say the least.
Yeah.
You've just listened to part 1 of Forever Fab podcast. Please stay tuned for part 2 coming up next.